My name is Denise Smalls, and I am with the West Lakes Financial Wellbeing Center. Thank you for joining us this evening for the Getting You from an Apartment to a Home webinar. Before we bring on our distinguished panelists, I would just want to tell you a little bit about us. So as I said, I'm with the West Lakes Financial Wellbeing Center, and we provide the following services to the West Lakes and 32805 community. And those services are free to those communities. So we provide virtual financial counseling. We provide financial webinars, such as this webinar here, job placement information, career resources, and community resources. So if you are interested in any of those services, please feel free to reach out to my coworker, Latricia Holt, and her telephone number and email is there on the screen. And I just want you to know that we are the West Lakes Financial Wellbeing Center is sponsored by Lyft Orlando and Truist. Before we get started, just want to let you know that you are currently muted and your video is turned off. And this webinar is being recorded. If you have any questions throughout the webinar, please use the Q&A feature, and all questions will be answered by Mr. Ayers during the webinar. Once he finishes his webinar and all questions are answered, I will provide a post-test link. So this is the same questions that you answered when you registered for this webinar. And what we want to know is if you, Mr. Ayers is going to give you all of the wonderful information to all of those questions, and we want to know if you were able to get those answers. So that's why we have the post-test. So on the post-test, it's going to be real simple. You're going to just put your full name in that post-test, answer the questions, and just hit submit. It takes less than a minute to do that. Again, you'll have all the answers after the webinar. And then once you submit your post-test, we will have a raffle drawing once all the post-test assessments are received. So please don't leave once Mr. Ayers has finished, because we still want to do that post-test with you, and we want to provide a raffle. And we just wanted to let you know that we collect and maintain registration information, and we use this information to communicate with you about our future webinars. And the West Lakes Financial Wellbeing Center provide webinars every month. So if you are curious about the webinars or want to know more about our services, again, you could contact my coworker, Latricia Holt. So before I turn it over to Mr. Ayers, just want to tell you a little bit about him. He is the Executive Director of West Lakes Partnership, which is a resident-driven neighborhood nonprofit that seeks to strengthen the 5 neighborhoods of West Lakes, which include Clear Lakes, Lake Sunset, Lake Lorna Dune, and Rock Lake. Mr. Ayers has been involved in government and community development since his early 20s, and he's only 26 today, so happy birthday. One of the main components of West Lakes Partnership is to decrease the number of vacant housing and increase home ownership in West Lakes. So again, if you have any questions as we go through the webinar, please feel free to put those in the Q&A, and Mr. Ayers will definitely answer those questions. And I will turn it over to Mr. Ayers, and I am bringing up his PowerPoint.
Thank you so much, Denise. As you bring it up, first of all, we should all give kudos to you for that opening slide. That was wonderfully created. So kudos to you for doing that. As Denise mentioned, my name is Timothy Ayers. I'm the Executive Director of West Lakes Partnership, and I'm pleased that all of you got on the call this evening to talk about how to move you or transition you from living in an apartment to owning your home if that's something you want to do. So that's the primary purpose for us getting together tonight. I'll also share with you, that's the first component. The second component is a program that Westlake's Partnership put together in 2018 to do, as Denise mentioned, to decrease the number of vacant single-family homes we had and increase the rate of home ownership in the Westlakes neighborhood. And I should mention that there are actually 5 neighborhoods. It's Lake Lorna Dune, Rock Lake, the 2 Clear Lake neighborhoods, which are Bunch Manor and Clear Lake Cove, and then we have Lake Sunset as well. My organization was created back in 2015 by residents who lived in those 5 neighborhoods. But I want to give you a little bit about my own personal background so you know from where I come from. I spent over 20 years in either government or primarily government positions, either as an elected official or working in a government department, primarily dealing with legislation in the Ohio State House. And then I spent 15 years of my career in nonprofit at the Nashville Chamber of Commerce, helping people open business. And then the chamber had an issue, particularly in one of its African-American communities, where they just did not have, even though the chambers of commerce deal with business issues, they did not have a good relationship with the African-American community in Nashville. And one of the issues in one of those neighborhoods was the lack of affordable housing. So we created an organization called the North Nashville Community Development Corporation, which attempted to develop and create housing as well as businesses along historic Jefferson Street. If you've ever been to Nashville, Tennessee, Jefferson Street is the home of Fisk University, Meharry Medical College, and Tennessee State University. If you ever have been there years ago and go back now, the difference on Jefferson Street is the difference between night and day. The history of the program I'm about to talk about actually was begun by my first chairman of the board of Westlake's Partnership. And the reason he tasked me with the idea of creating this program is because as Lift Orlando tore down the apartments that existed on Orange Center and Texas, those 3 complexes, the ability to notice vacant housing and the quality of housing that were vacant became more prevalent. And one of the things he wanted to create was a program to help people become homeowners, to fill those homes with homeowners. And so that's what Reclaiming the Dream housing program does. Now, let me just emphasize, this is one among many programs in Orange County that you can hook into. I'm just going to cover what our program does tonight. But if you ever come to my office, I will refer you, if we can't help you, to a variety of programs that do the same thing. The other thing I want to say before I get into my presentation is normally when I do one of these presentations, I usually have about 20 to 30 to 35 slides because typically the speaker does most of the talking. I hope, because I only have 10 slides and it's my goal to make this as interactive as possible. So let's do as Denise mentioned. If you have questions, I have a couple of hard stops for questions, but if you have questions before I get to those hard stops, feel free to put those in the chat or the Q&A. And Denise, if you can give me heads up, I will answer them at that point in time. So if we can go on to the next, before we go into the next slide, Denise, for 6 years of my career, one of the best jobs I ever had, and I've loved all of my jobs, but one of the best jobs I ever had was working as a mortgage loan officer for my cousin's mortgage company in the state of Kentucky and Tennessee. My cousin owned a mortgage company during the heydays of the mid to late 1990s and early 2000, when if you were breathing, you could probably get a home. The score you needed back then was a 575 compared to what the score is, which is a lower score compared to what you need today for most loans. So it was just a wonderful time. And I can still remember it happened in a town called Elkton, Kentucky, where I sat at the table as the loan officer to the individuals, and we helped them purchase their first home. It was a double wide. I don't know if many of you know what a double wide is, but it's literally a big trailer that's it's been seen together, and they purchased the double wide in a rural part of Kentucky. Now, let me just briefly talk about the roles that are involved in my program and in house ownership. There's the mortgage broker and the mortgage lender. They are two different roles. I was a loan officer. I've never worked for a mortgage lender. The mortgage lender has the money. I worked for a mortgage broker who was my cousin. All we did was facilitate getting in the necessary paperwork to the lender to make sure that when we sat down at the table to close on your home, that the money was there. So you have to know the difference. Now, my role at Westlake's Partnership is that of the seller. Okay, so we own the property, Westlake's Partnership, and we're trying to sell it to a family to live in. And then, of course, there's the buyer. That would be you if you decide to venture down that path. Denise, you can go on to the next slide. Okay, the next two slides are just the quality of the homes we purchase versus after rehab. This first slide is at 519 Sunset Drive. You can see the pre-picture of the home. Literally, I always take these pictures on the day we purchased the home. So this is exactly what the home looked like on the day we purchased. After we closed on the home, purchased it from the previous buyer, and this is what the home looked like. The home on the right is after the rehab. I can tell you that a member of my board picks out all the colors, and we just have the contractor rehab it based on her design and color selection and so forth. But that's one of the homes we did. This is actually the second home we did. The next slide is the first home we did. It's at 521 Sunset Drive. What you see on the left side is what the kitchen looked like versus what the kitchen looks like now. So what these two photos are evidence of is that we do good quality work. We got over 50 views of this particular home and over 67 views of the first home that you saw, which is amazing given the neighborhood, because we're trying to renovate not only the home, but we're trying to strengthen the neighborhood that these homes are in. So there's a couple of tasks we're trying to accomplish there. We can move to the next slide. This is the third home we're about to start at 622 South Lakeland. If you look off to the left of the building, you will notice the newly constructed Boys and Girls Club. So this home sits right next door to the Boys and Girls Club. I'm going to give you what our program has done to date by the numbers. We're trying to establish generational wealth. So when you own a home, that allows you, as you pay off your mortgage, to create generational wealth, both for you and members of your family. And it's geared toward home ownership. By the way, any potential answers that are underlined are answers that will appear on your post-test. So if you see something underlined, that's an answer to one of your questions on your post-test. That's our priority. We've acquired, since we did those first two properties, 3 additional properties, one at 622, which is the property off to the left, at 513 South Dollins. We acquired a house that will be tore down and demoed, and I just got the designs for the new construction. So that house will be a newly constructed home. We'll tear down the existing home and then we'll do new construction. That probably will be done in 2022. And the dates I put on here are estimates, because what we're finding with a lot of contractors is there's a shortage in supplies and material in order to do some construction or new rehab. So we're a little bit behind on 622 because we're putting a new roof on it, and the materials we need for that are on back order in order to do that. We also purchased a vacant lot at 2204 West South Street. Actually, this lot is a lot we purchased or in the process of purchasing. We close on it tomorrow from HUD. So this is vacant property we acquired from them, or will acquire from them. We probably won't do anything right away with that property other than keep it clean and maintained in the neighborhood so that it looks good. We'll move to the next slide unless there are any questions. Okay, I'm just going to give you a background of our program. In 2018, we were awarded our first grant of $150,000, and that's the amount of money we spent at 521 in order to rehab it. We do both grant funded rehab and new construction. That means any money I receive from the government to do either rehabs of an existing home or new construction, typically those are grant funded. There is an exception. 622 is privately funded. And the difference between the two is, I'll talk about later, but there's a difference. And I always tell people who come to meet with me, there's a difference between a grant funded home and a privately funded home. And we'll talk about those differences in a second. I think someone has a question for me in the Q&A. So someone asked, do we have any exceptions for people who have an eviction on their credit report? Let me hold on that question until we talk about credit later. And I'm going to give you my former expertise as a loan officer for a mortgage broker and how we looked at evictions. Now, I am not an expert now because the mortgage industry has changed since I left it. So what I would do if you came to my office would be to refer you to a counselor to help deal with those issues. And I'm going to show you that later by showing you not my own personal credit report, but some work that I had done before I became a homeowner on my credit report. The purpose of the program, as I mentioned before, is to increase home ownership in the area and reduce the inventory of single family houses that were vacant. I don't know how many of you live in West Lakes, but we currently have between 75 and 100 vacant single family housing or houses in the area. And so what we're trying to do is reduce that number over the next 5 years. So it's not as evident as it appears to some people and appears to me. I can't bring up this particular link, but what that link says under why become a homeowner is that the city of Orlando has the 5th highest rent in the country. So if you live in the city of Orlando, the rent you pay, and of course that depends on the neighborhood and where the house is, or where the apartment or house you're renting is located, is the 5th highest in the country. And again, that varies depending on the neighborhood, depending on the house, and et cetera, and the landlord you're renting from. I need to tell you that since that first grant in 2018, we've been awarded 2 grants after that. The first one was 150. The second one was for 400,000, in which we did 519 and was able to acquire some additional property in order to continue the program. We'll go on to the next slide. Now, I'm going to walk you through what would happen if you come to my office and say, Tim, I'm interested in your program. What do I need to do? So I'm going to make the assumption that this is a grant-funded home. Let's just assume it is. And it could either be a rehab or new construction. All right. Here's how I determine eligibility. You're going to fill out an application for me first. Well, you're going to fill out an application. It's a 2-page application. We do not pull credit. We do not provide money in order for you to purchase the house, okay? Eligibility rules are determined by HUD and the city of Orlando. It is based on area, median income, and family size. Okay, and we're going to talk about that in a second. In 2019, the AMI, area median income, again, that's an answer that's going to show up on your post test, was $65,100. Now, you know, don't go into shock if you don't make $65,100. I'm going to explain to you what that means for this program. But we know that the AMI is $65,100. That's what I operate off of now when you come to see me. If the money we get is from CDBG, which stands for Community Development Block Grant, you don't have to worry about what that means or anything. It requires us to sell to any applicants that have a total household income between 50 to 80% AMI. So I'm going to go through a brief exercise for a second. So if you are, and Denise, I need your help on this. Just tell me if someone did it. If you come from a family of 2 people, and don't pay attention to where it says extremely low income, because I cannot sell a house to anyone that's extremely low income, okay? If you come from a household of 2 people, and I hope you can see this, what is the least amount of money your household can bring to the table? And this is, again, annual household income. If you can put it in the chat or the Q&A. I hope all of you can see that, because this is what I go by.
Okay, we have 27,800. Anyone
Correct.
else?
What is that is correct. What is the most amount of money? And this is what typically has happened whenever we have sold homes for our program, that a family of 4 can make. Not the least, but the most.
I have 44,400.
For a family of 4?
Okay, I have someone else that's put in 55,500.
$509, correct. So that's the first thing I'm going to do. Even though the application I give you, I have to give you that. I mean, the city requires that I ask you those questions, even though I'm not the lender, because really that application is more for the lender. So these are the guidelines I'm going to ask you to do. And then I'm going to ask you, even though I've not had to do this before with the 6 applicants that applied for the first 2 homes we did, they had already done their due diligence and brought a letter of credit with them. All right. I'm not a letter of credit, a pre-approval letter with them. I'm going to ask, do you have a pre-approval letter? Have you seen your credit report? Typically, I will ask, have you seen your credit report? Because that'll tell me who I need to refer you to. More often than not, a lot of the inquiries have been people who have not yet seen their credit report. In that instance, because we don't pull credit, I will refer you to someone who does. I think Denise and her organization does that. And I know they work with others who help people improve their credit score. Now, here's a key answer, although it's not, it just depends on the loan you get. A conventional loan requires a middle FICO credit score, or FICO score of 620. Now, there are some exceptions to that depending on the loan you get, but I always tell people try for a middle score of 620. Now, we'll talk about that further when we get to credit, but I want you to see on this chart, and Denise, if you want to, you can pass this out to them so that they see when they come to me, this is the chart I have to go by. I'm required by HUD, which stands for Housing and Urban Development, which is a federal department of government, and the city of Orlando to follow this chart. So really, even though I'm the seller, when it's grant funded, when government money is involved, I have to follow these income restrictions and these family size restrictions. I just can't sell it to anyone, because the first calls I always get when we finish a property are from investors who want to buy the house and then they want to rent it out themselves. I can't sell it to them, and I always have to tell them that. They are typically the first 2 or 3 calls I always get. I can only sell a house, depending on the grant, to individuals that fall within the range of 50% to 80% of AMI. Does everyone understand that? What in terms of this program? Someone asked me, is there any help for those who have limited income? You would need to define for me what limited income means. So in the case of our program, given the funds we use, if limited incomes means extremely low income, which I think is 30%, we could not help you. Because we can only sell to those individuals or those households who are between 50 and 80% of AMI. Now, are there homes, are there programs that may sell to individuals who have less income than that? Probably. I can look those up for you and get that information to you. Any other questions? Someone, I don't know if this is a question or not, says they pay over $1,600 for a 2-bedroom apartment. Let's hold that thought for a second, and I'm going to share my experience with you later on in the presentation. Someone asked me, could you please touch on HUD homes and HUD foreclosed foreclosure homes? Yes, I can. So there is a list, and you can Google this information. It's all public information. Anytime the government is involved for most things, it's public information. You can simply Google HUD foreclosed homes in Florida. It'll take you to a list of homes that are in the process of foreclosure, or you can go on, I think it's the tax collectors. It's either tax collector or clerk of courts. I always get it confused. Their website, and get that information, and you can bid on homes that have tax liens against them. I do it all the time on behalf of Westlakes in the Westlakes area. We haven't gotten one yet, but I try to do it just so that we can get one. So that's a great question, Ms. Williams. If your income is SSI, again, it depends on, here's a great example. So I do a food program. Westlakes Partnership undertakes a hot meals program. We have individuals who are on SSI, and the SSI is less than $600 a month. We also have individuals who are seniors, obviously, who are getting $3,600 a month. Well, those are vastly different ranges of support they get from SSI. Probably with the individual, if I did the math off the top of my head, would probably qualify for our program. The person who unfortunately makes considerably less would not, based on the income I know they're receiving, because roughly there are some individuals I know make less than $9,000 a year. So they would not under our program. There are some rent to own programs that exist out there, but you'd have to talk to similar nonprofits, or you can call the city of Orlando to get referred to who they are. I think there's another question. No. All right, we can go to the next slide. Any other questions on that before we do? Great, great. All right, we'll go to the next slide. I think the next slide is, okay. 622 is going to be privately funded. Now, what's the difference between privately funded and grant funded? Remember, we are the seller. All we're trying to do is fix up a house or build a new house and put it on the market to sell. If it's grant funded, we have certain rules we have to follow, we're required to follow by the federal government. If we fund it, if we use our line of credit and there's no government funds attached at all I need for you to do is walk in my office, typically with a pre-approval letter, with a middle FICO credit score of 620, although I don't need to see your credit report, you just need to fill out my application. Because if your score is whatever it is, and we'll talk about different scores, and you've gotten a pre-approval letter, that means someone has already pulled your credit report and deemed it satisfactory enough for you to get a pre-approval letter. And that's extremely important. I'm not a real estate agent, but most real estate agents may sign you up as a client, but they may not want to show you houses until you get that. Because typically you will always want a house that you may not be able to afford, and that's why you need the pre-approval letter. Now, while the answer on question 5 is yes, so if you answered yes on the pre-test, that's fine. But what I would recommend personally, and this is the only wiggle room I have with this program, is that you fill out an application first, because I would need to know, okay, who's interested, whether or not you're ready or not. So the answer could be yes or no, but I would prefer, the answer actually in terms of Westlake's policy is yes. We would love for you to have that already ready, but if not, you can come in, fill out the application. So I can put you on the list of people to stay in touch with about the progress of the home or the construction. Now here's a caveat we just instituted. If it's a non-grant funded home, meaning it's privately funded, either to rehab or to build, Westlake's partnership will help you with 50% of your closing costs if you are an existing Westlake's renter. So that means if you live in any of the 5 neighborhoods that Denise or I mentioned and want to move into a home in Westlake, we will cover 50% of your closing costs. Typically, of the 2 homes we have done to date, without revealing any personal information, one of the homeowners put less than $4,000 down. I think if my memory serves me correct. So, you know, because we paid a significant portion of that. Okay, any questions? Someone asked me a question, what about business income? Ms. Williams, I believe that's Ms. Williams. I'm not sure what you mean by that. So if you can just offer me some clarification, I'll try to answer that as well. You mean, is that considered? I think that's what you mean. If that's what you mean, and you're a independent business owner, that means you pay yourself and all that good stuff, yes, it's considered. If it's a, if you set up a corporation where that business entity itself pays taxes, it would not be. The income they're looking for, which is debt to ratio, is what is the income you receive as an individual. Now, if it comes from that business, you have to count that income, not the business income, but the salary, if you will, that they pay you as an individual. Okay, we'll go on to the next slide.
Tim, you have a question in the Q&A.
Great question. Yeah, great question. Do you have to be a Westlake resident to get assistance? You do not have to be a Westlake resident to purchase a home. Matter of fact, the first 2 homes that were purchased were by non-Westlake residents. Now, I think you're asking me about the down payment assistance. You do have to be a Westlake resident in that sense, yes. But we can help you once you get approved by the city, because let me tell you what happens on the back end. So you come to me with a pre-approval letter, we got that, you fill out my application, we got that. Hopefully you've done that beforehand. We got that. What then happens is I send that information. I literally email the city and say, hey, I got a buyer, they're interested, we have a negotiated price. They respond back with a list of things you have to send me and I have to forward on to them. And usually that's last 6 months bank statements, depending on how you're paid, the last 2 to 3 months, paychecks, et cetera, et cetera. And I forget a couple of the other items. You get that information to me, I get it on to the city. The city processes, they send back to me based on that chart you saw earlier, this person's eligible. Once they do that, then the deal, other than closing and all that, is pretty well signed off by the city. Now, there's some documents I have to sign. Now, let me give you the downside of our program, because I'm always blunt, and I want to have this presentation be like a family conversation. I'm always blunt with people when they come into my office and they eventually get around to. They say something along the lines of, this sounds too good. What am I missing? So the city requires, vis-a-vis HUD, that whoever purchases the property, okay, so in the first property, we invested $150,000 to fix it up, okay? So HUD and the city requires that we ask the buyer to sign what's called a restricted covenant. And what that simply means is that the buyer has to commit to living in that property for 10 years. Now, you don't have to stay in it, but if you don't, then whatever is the balance on that 150, let's use that as the example, has to be paid by the buyer. So for example, in the first house we acquired, they have been there a year and a half. So that's the house that was 150. So $15,000 over the course of each year is reduced. You're not paying that. That's just reduced off of the obligation. So by the 10th year, what'll happen is the city will send me the paperwork. I'll get you to sign it. And other than your mortgage, you are not obligated to do. You can move, you can sell it to your cousin, you can do whatever you want. But HUD requires that in order to make sure, because quite frankly, we spend more with grant money than we do with private dollars to fix up a home. And so HUD wants to make sure people aren't doing this, getting HUD money, government money, flipping it to a private investor, and then he or she is making money off government money. We can always talk about that. Most people haven't had a problem with that, but I tell people up front, if it's grant funded, that's the one caveat to the homes that we have. I think there's another question. What if you're not living in the area, but your child goes there? When you say goes there, you mean goes to school or is involved? What do you mean by that? I assume you mean goes to school in the area? If they go to school, or if they're resident and your child is trying to acquire it, they would be eligible. If it's a young child who's not able to sign for a loan, they would not be. Okay, Denise, we can go on to the next one. And if they can give me some clarification on that one question, I'll come back to it.
They did give you clarification. They said, yes, the person goes to school in the area.
So I assume the person is underage. So if that child is underage, let me ask this. Hold on for a second. Do you have any lenders? Oh, that's someone else's question. I'll get to that in a second. Yes, goes to school. Does the parent live in the area? If the parent lives in the area, they would qualify. The child is not, remember, we go by the income of the adults and or people 18 and over who have income. So we can't go by the status of a young child. So we do. In terms of lenders, Ms. Simmons, that I would recommend, there are a variety of, so the difference between a mortgage broker and a mortgage lender, Loan Depot is a mortgage lender, Quicken is a mortgage lender. I mean, they're the ones that actually have the money. There are a variety of mortgage brokers. You can look them up in the phone book. If you get a realtor first, they have access to a number of people they have worked with over the years. They can help you there. We have 3 real estate agents in Westlake, Africa Hindley, who many of you know from the apartments if you live there, Antoinette Gals, who I believe she was a member of my board, but I believe is the only mortgage broker in the area. And Kay Reddick, who is a real estate agent, been in the business for a number of years. If you need any help with those individuals, put your name in the chat, and I'll make sure that they get your name and contact information to reach out to you. So offhand, I do not refer people to lenders. Typically, as I said before, the applicants who have come in have already been pre-approved, which was a surprise to me, to be honest. Most of the inquiries I get are from people that have not even checked their credit report. But the people who have actually applied for the 2 houses that we have done, they have already been pre-approved and came with their letter already. So that's the advantage of letting me know that, hey, I'm interested by filling out your application. We can go on to the next slide unless there are additional questions. Here's my hard stop. Are there any questions that we might have about the program? Anything I missed that I did not cover? Let me look in the chat. I think I answered most of those. I think we're good there. Okay. Now, before we go to the next slide, I wanted to do this presentation because a lot of people think, and I know this from my experience as a mortgage or as a loan officer with a mortgage broker. Let me just say something about credit scores. Well, I'll come to that in a second. When I was a loan officer, here's how we look. We pull what's called a tri-merge. We don't pull each individual credit report. There are 3 of them: TransUnion, Equifax, and Experian. We pull what's called a tri-merge. You know, I don't think this has changed since I was a loan officer. We pull what's called a tri-merge. A tri-merge is we're essentially asking all 3 credit bureaus to merge it into one report. There are software systems that allow lenders or brokers to do that. And it is more extensive and more, that's what they base their decision on, whether or not you're pre-approved for a home. So here's the secret. It really isn't the secret, but I'm going to share it with you. Most of you will pull up your credit report, even if you pay for your credit score from Experian, Equifax, and TransUnion. They will give you what's called the retail score. And what that typically is, because there's various scoring models with credit bureaus. What that typically is, if you apply for a credit card or to purchase a car or even insurance for that matter, there are various scoring models that allow you to get a credit card, to get a car, et cetera, et cetera. But the ones that are important for you to see at all time in order to purchase a house are the following credit scores. And this is what's on your tri-merge report. FICO score number 2 for Experian. FICO score number 5 for Equifax. FICO score number 4 for TransUnion. I always, because this is the most important purchase you're going to make. And so you need to know what those scores are. You don't need to know what your retail score are. Yeah, it's helpful, but typically scores are either lower or higher. And you need to know exactly what a loan officer is going to look at when he does your tri-merge, because he's not pulling the score. And if you're using Credit Karma, throw it away, burn it, do whatever, because that's not what a loan officer is looking at. They're looking at your tri-merge credit report. All right. And then those are the FICO scores that they're actually compiling on that report. Real quickly, let me share something with you, and then we'll move on to the next one. So we're looking for the middle score. As a loan officer, when I was a loan officer, I pulled the tri-merge report. And let's say Denise has a credit score of 620, 630, and 527. In the chat, put which score am I going to decide whether or not she gets a loan? Which score? So she's got a credit score of 620, 630, and 527. If you don't think you know the score, just say yes or no if you think she'll qualify for a loan. So the three scores were 620, 630, and 527.
One of the answers is 620.
Who answered that?
Chantel.
Who provided that answer?
Stephanie.
That
Awesome.
is, whoever said 620 should become a loan officer. So here's what we do, or what we did. Again, I'm not a professional anymore, but my cousin is still in the business, and he shares with me what they're still doing. Here's what we do when we get that tri-merge report. It's the most exciting yet frustrating part of being a loan officer, because you see it right away. So here's what we do. Here's what we're taught to do. If the scores are different, which in this case it is, there are three different scores, we get rid of the low score, which in this case is 527, and we get rid of the high score, which is 630. That leaves 620 as her middle FICO score. So in this case, depending on the lender she went to, she might qualify for a loan. They're going to ask her some questions about that credit report that came up with a 527. You know, she may have to clear up some issues relative to that, but at least the 620 stands as the middle FICO score. All right, here's another one. Now, if you get this, you're going to truly become a loan officer tonight. I can't qualify you, but you will. Let's assume Denise has the following scores. She has a 690, a 670, and a 670. What is the score they're going to look at for whether or not she's approved for a loan? I'll let a couple of people put them in the chat. Ooh, you guys are wonderful. I'm looking at the answers. That's absolutely correct. Most of you, if not all of you, said 670. Whenever there are two scores that are the same, they don't care if her other score is, I think 850 is the highest you can go on your credit scoring. They don't care if it's an 850. What they're going to go with are the two scores that are the same. And that has not changed since I got out of the business. They typically will go with the two scores that are changed. Now I'm going to give you some caveats, and then we'll go on to my personal journey, because I became a homeowner since I moved here about 1.5 years ago, and just share with you that sometimes things happen. You know, COVID happened last year, and there were a lot of people who came to my office and said, I'm ready, you know, to purchase a house, and then COVID happens. No one anticipated that. People got laid off. Their income got reduced. So I'm just going to share with you what my story was, and maybe it will resonate with you. Now, everyone's journey is different, and you'll see that in a second. So if you get a conventional loan, which is the question I asked you in your pre-test, that credit score, typically the minimal score needs to be a 620. And if it's an FHA loan, you may go as low as 580. They would prefer that you be higher, but you'll have to pay 3% down. So if you purchase $100,000 house, just hypothetically, you multiply that times 3, and that's what you plus closing costs have to bring to the table. If it's a VA loan, those of you who are veteran, there's no minimum, but they prefer that you have a 620. And I believe that hasn't changed. But again, I would, if you come to my office, fill out the application, express an interest, I'm going to refer you on to a lender who might be able to help you or give you a list of lenders. I think that's one of the things I'm going to do. So thank you, whoever said that, is put together a list of lenders that people can go to. And the one thing I will say to you, if you go to any lenders, whether they be brokers or actual mortgage lenders, if you're going to have more than one broker or lender pull your credit report, make sure it's done within, I want to say it's a week to 2 that they actually pulled it. Because if you stretch it out of the course of a month, you're going to have hard inquiries that will impact your score. When I was a loan officer, I've had, I think it was 4 or 5, I can't remember the exact number because it's been a while. I give them a pre-approval letter and I tell them, hey, I need this paperwork in, and they're excited, they're happy, they're about ready to purchase a house. And the applicants in this case, the one thing they did is they wanted to buy new furniture or whatever new for the house. It could be appliances, but they wanted to buy new stuff. And I tell them, and I'm telling you, if you get pre-approved for a house, do not buy anything. A car, appliances, anything that you put on your credit card, do not buy. Just, you simply don't want to do it, because what happens is they pull your credit in the beginning and then they pull it again right before closing. And I had at least 4 or 5 applicants who got pre-approved and then got denied 2 days prior to the closing because they purchased a major purchase on their credit card, and that skewed the debt to loan ratio. So that's just one caution I'll give to you. All right, we'll move on to the next section.
Before we move on, Tim, can you?
Yes, ma'am.
You have a question or comment in the chat. It says, Crystal wanted to know whether you get the information for that tri-merge credit report.
So you're going to have to go to, I would recommend not going to a lender to get it. I would say if you were in my office, I would say, listen, there are counseling people, housing counselors who can pull who should be able to pull a tri-merge report. Denise, are you able to do that with your?
No, sir.
Okay. I don't know if Help CDC is one of those, but if they're not, because I don't know others, I do know a lender can do it, but I wouldn't necessarily recommend that you take a hit off your credit score just to see what your tri-merge is. Now, if you're fairly comfortable, your scores are high, you will at least know what your scores are. I will get some information to Denise, who will disseminate it to those of you on the call tonight as to where you can get tri-merge reports. Just be careful that you don't pay for one with the credit bureaus, because those are not, unless they have the FICO scores that I gave you, those are not necessarily what a lender is going to look at. All right. Now, before I go on to the next slide, just keep in mind, Westlake's Partnership is the seller. All right. We are the seller. Everyone has a role: the buyer, the seller, real estate agents, housing counselors, mortgage lenders, and mortgage brokers. And of course, you are the one that decides, for the most part, who you're going to go with. Who's your real estate agent? What lender or broker you're going to go with? Whether or not you're going to buy from Westlake's Partnership or you're going to go in another neighborhood. Those are all decisions you have to make. But the decision you have to start with is, I need to understand what my credit score is. And I'm going to show you something that's going to shock most of you who are looking at your own credit report. And this happened to me. So I'm going to give you a sneak peek. Obviously, I'm not going to show you my credit report, but this is as close as I can get without revealing private information. Okay, we'll go to the next slide. Crystal, I think that was Crystal. What do you mean your scores don't match? I think that was Crystal. Yeah, Crystal, what do you mean your scores don't match? Oh, well, let me go to Chantel first. So Chantel, you have your pre-approval letter. Congratulations. You made your first offer on a home, but it was not accepted. So again, I'm not a realtor, but you have the option to make a counter offer. But your agent, who I assume you have one, can walk you through that. And then this is Crystal. You say, to me, the scores don't seem to match. I'm not sure I understand your question. Oh, wow. Chantel, 35 offers from one house. Unfortunately, we're in a market that there's a desperate need for housing. When we did this program, when we started this program, many people thought we could not sell the property that we rehab for the prices that we sell. And remember, because they're grant funded, I can't sell them for market rate. I have to sell them so that someone at 50 to 80% AMI can afford that home. Okay. It's not that there's a cap on what I can sell it for, but there is. So, and let's see, this is a seller's market. I would love to put my house up for sale. Okay. Crystal, you asked me annual credit report with these scores be the same score. No, because annual credit report will give you the scores of what I call retail scores. And I say that only because I pull an annual credit report every year just to make sure nothing has popped up on my credit report. And my FICO scores are 50 point higher than the score that pops up on annualcreditreport.com. It's not that annualcreditreport.com is wrong. It's just that it's not giving me my FICO scores that are important if I were to purchase another house. And then Stephanie, you purchased a car 3 months ago. Have you made any other major purchases? If the answer to that is no, then you should be okay. But what it did do, just so that you know, and again, I'm not a loan officer. You'd have to talk to someone that's used to doing loans. Is that you need to find out what your debt to ratio is. Meaning, debt to ratio simply means the amount of income they're counting versus the debt you have. And included in that debt is your monthly obligation for the car, unless you paid the car off when you acquired it. Did I cover all of them, Denise?
No, there's another one in the chat. Crystal.
Okay. So Krista, I know this is frustrating. What I would tell you to do is let me put together where you can go get them. I'll get that information to Denise and she'll send it out. Denise, you have the capability of sending information to them, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, I'll get that information tonight to Denise, and then I'll have her send it to you and others on the call, so you know where to go. Again, you can go to a lender, you can go to a mortgage broker to get it. You know, I wouldn't recommend that, but you can go. If that's your last resort or only resort, you can go there. But it's a hard pull, and a hard pull means anywhere from 2 to 3 to 5 points is going to come off your credit score because they did a hard pull of your credit. I would recommend that a tri-merge be done by someone who can do it and it won't bother you. So the ones you're sending will also be a hard pull. Yes, so whoever can do it, a nonprofit, is still going to be a hard pull, but at least, particularly if you have not seen those scores, you will know what you're dealing with. Because a lot of people come to me and say, I've never seen my credit report, ever. Or they come in and say, there's some things I'm still paying off. And sometimes that's the worst thing you can do is pay off debt that you have on your credit report. And I'll tell you why when you see it in my own personal journey. All right, we'll go to the next slide. I want to make this is a family conversation, so thank you for all the questions. All right, I'm going to talk about, I've been in Central Florida since 2014. I moved here. For the first 6 months, I lived in Hunters Creek, and thought that was the center of Orlando. I don't know why I moved there. My brother, who previously lived here, said that's a great neighborhood, and I thought that was Orlando. So when I finally drove to downtown Orlando, I thought, man, this is far, and ended up moving in late 2014 to that apartment that's at the top that you see at the far left. And this is to go back to the first question I took. It was a 1-bedroom. I didn't realize how much rent was in Orlando. It was a 1-bedroom apartment, nice 1-bedroom apartment, but it cost me $1,600 per month. I was making great money, but I was in the words and wisdom of my late mama, what's called credit poor. Because just because you're making great money doesn't mean your credit scores are good. And you'll see that in a second. I'll tell you about what that means on the next slide. This is 2021. In 2019, I think it was, COVID was last year, 2020. So in 2019, October of 2020, October of 2019, I purchased the house that you see at the bottom right. Now, let me just say something. I purchased this home because I was just floored by the driveway. Because obviously I saw it on the internet and my agent showed it to me, but I had not seen the interior. That is not what my driveway looks like. So that was false advertisement, but I still love the home. Now, let me tell you how I got there, because, and this is brutally honest. Most speakers would not share this information, but I want to share it with you because sometimes life happens and it will throw you off your goal of becoming a homeowner. So we'll go to the next slide. Okay, this is a photo of being credit poor. By late 2016, I lost considerable income. I took a job in Homestead, Florida. I don't know if many of you know where Homestead, Florida is, but it's on the other side of Miami. I just took the job just so that I had income. I lost a contract that I was doing for a company, and my income was reduced by 50%. Each week I would travel back and forth. I'd leave Monday morning at 1 in the morning, get there by 8 o'clock. I would stay at Airbnbs in the area until I would drive back here. I would leave right at 5 o'clock, drive back here on, what is that, the Florida Turnpike, I believe. Drive back here from Miami or Homestead. And I did that for almost 6 months, not quite a year, but almost 6 months. It was wearing me out. Between 2016 and early 2017, I was in a financial meltdown because I went from an income of X to a reduced income of Y, okay? By July 2017, I got the job at Westlake's Partnership in September 2017. And this is how sometimes just meeting the right people at the right time makes all the difference in the world. I had known her before I actually called her the day, that particular day in September. There was a house that was for sale in, I want to say Clear Lake Cove. It may have been Bunch Manor. And I went to see it with Terry, who works for Lyft Orlando. We both just wanted, we were curious about it because it was on the lake. And I had known a resident who lives in Lake Sunset. She was one of the real estate agents I mentioned to you. And I know how to straighten up credit reports because I learned how to do it with when I was a loan officer. I know how to get stuff off your credit report, but I really didn't have the time. So Antoinette introduced me, and I think he did one of your seminars a year or so ago by the name of Tim Saunders of Credit Repair of Florida. Again, I know how to do what he does, and he charges people to help them. All right, I know how to do it. So I could have done it for free. Now, I want you, if you're able to see it, I have to take off my glasses to see it. I want you to look at my scores as of 10/24/2017 and tell me yes or no, would I have been eligible to purchase a house? My scores are at the bottom where it says, I think the first one says, what's the first one in pink say, Denise? I don't want to move my screen. Well, I can move mine.
I think it's 577.
577. Can you go across the page or that line?
And then 6. Oh, I can't see that. 670.
I know. Hold on. 676.
676, and then 545, I think it is.
548, I think.
Oh, 548.
Okay. You're a loan officer. You tell me if I would have been approved for a loan based on the steps I shared with you what a loan officer does when he pulls up your score. Let's assume these are my FICO scores. They're not, but let's make that assumption. Just say yes or no. Do we have more yeses than nos or more nos than yeses?
You have more no's than yeses.
Correct. I would not have been approved for a loan. Let me tell you why again, just refresh your memory. I have to bend over. So they would have taken out my 676. They would have taken out the low score of 548, and my score that they would have looked at, assuming these were FICO scores, it would have been 577. Now, I'm not going to share with you a secret that's contained in this report until we cover the next slide. Just if someone found it, don't say anything yet. Okay, so I mentioned who Antoinette introduced to me, and I called him up and said, and I was honest with him. I said, listen, I used to be a mortgage loan officer. I know how to do this. I simply don't have the time. Can you do it? He said, okay. Now, this is the worst feeling you have, particularly when you apply for anything. I'm giving a person that I don't know. Yes, he was referred to me by someone I know. I'm giving him my name and number, my social security number, and my date of birth. Now, that's all you need to open up anything you want in that person's name. So let's go to the next slide. Are we on the next? Yeah, okay. Oops, I thought I arrived. It should say, I thought I had arrived. So let's look at my scores. Denise, can you read those off for us? Bottom line. And this is as of August 16th, or August 10th, 2019. So almost a year and a half later.
706, 712, and 694.
Okay. And notice how different they are. Here's the thing. So the 796 score is always the credit bureau. Whenever you have the higher score or the lowest score, I mean, it could be one or the other. It's never the middle score. That's the credit bureau that most companies are reporting to. So either it's going to be extremely low or extremely high because you've made payments. So in my case, I think that's TransUnion. I can't really see it. That's where most of my creditors report to. So I've done a good job with them because they see most of my accounts on their reports being reported. So tell me, yes or no, would I have been able to purchase a house based on my scores that you see with this report? Yes or no? You can put it in the chat or Q&A. Denise, more yeses than nos or more nos than yeses?
More yeses than nos.
Correct. I would have been able. Now, what made the difference in that year and a half? I'm going to make most of you loan officers tonight. What happened in that year and a half that would raise my credit score that much? Denise, if you go back to the slide we previously covered. So this was the very first report Tim gave me. There's a number that's in red. Anyone know what that number means? So I'll explain it to you because it is hard to read. So this was the first report he ever sent me. In essence, he said that report is reading 7 items either have been deleted or modified since you started the program. I'm paraphrasing, but since you started the program. In other words, the very first report, whatever he did, and all he did was write a letter challenging, whatever was on my report. And I'll explain to you what it was just so that you know. He got 7 of the items either deleted, and in most cases, I think they were deleted, or modified in a positive direction so that it actually helped my score. So let's go to back to the slide we just left. So this was the very last report he gave me. How many total items were either deleted or modified on my credit report? It's in red. You can put it in the chat if you know it. Kathy Hunter, oh yes, wonderful. Yep. So 51 items. You're like, good Lord, how many? What did Mr. Ayers do that he had 51 items? You know what it was? A credit report isn't always about positive accounts or negative accounts. I had moved a lot. So I lived in Ohio. Well, I was born in Ohio, moved in Ohio 3 times, either to or from or within Ohio. From Ohio, I moved to Kentucky. From Kentucky, I moved to Tennessee. From Tennessee, I moved back to Ohio. From Ohio, when I got tired of the winter, I moved down here to Florida. So that's 5 different moves that probably, I'm guessing now because I don't remember, probably were 10 different addresses, 7 to 10 different addresses. Now that doesn't affect your credit score, but what he did was clean it up. Like there are addresses that were on my credit report that were either duplicates, abbreviations that were wrong, and he got it all taken off. Now, there were some negative items, like I had a student loan that was on my credit report, and they hadn't reported any payments at all. And so he went back and got them to report all of the payments I had been making, which upped my credit score. And then he cleared off duplicate names, like, is my name Timothy? Is my name Tim F, which is my middle initial? Is my name, because you sign sometimes loan applications or whatever differently. He cleaned all that up. So sometimes you need help. And this is the lesson I learned. Now, I'm giving you 3 lessons. Sometimes a third party is needed. In my case, I did it because I just did not have the time to do it, even though I knew how to do it. He did it quicker than what it would have taken me, but it accomplished my task, okay? And then he recommended, and I thought he was the craziest man in the world. He said, well, okay, Tim, I know you were a loan officer, but you're going to have to bring to the table X amount of dollars to close on your loan. Again, I hadn't taken it out, but we kind of figured out based on my income what I could afford. I lived in an Airbnb on the far east side. I loved it living over there, but it seemed like I was out in Timbuktu. I lived actually down the street from you, Denise, in that general area for a year and a half to save up for my down payment. The lesson there is that sacrifice sometimes is required. Sometimes you may have to stay in that apartment in order to save money if it's an affordable apartment. Sometimes you may have to live with a relative in order to save up money for a down payment. Because I'm going to tell you, even though you have a pre-approval letter, unless you have the capability or get down payment assistance to bring money to the table, you won't be able to close. I've seen it far too often when I was a loan officer. Hopefully, because right now I know the city of Orlando has suspended their down payment assistance program. Hopefully, both the city and county, I don't remember the status of the county, will start that up again, because that was an excellent engine to get people into home ownership. All right, so despite the 700 credit scores I had, the very first lender I applied to, I was turned down. I was turned down, and I'll share with you the reason. And many of you may find yourself in this situation. If you have a student loan, and at any point that student loan was in forbearance, that means you weren't, or deferred, that means you weren't making payments on that loan, which is great. I mean, circumstances may have necessitated you doing that. I get it. I did it during that time I talked about earlier. However, that means nothing's being reported to your credit union. I mean, credit bureau, my apologies, credit bureau. And it stays on there. And remember, interest is attached to those student loans. So the balance is getting bigger. So that threw my debt ratio out of whack. And so the very first lender turned me down. Now, I was fortunate enough that he thought well enough of me to say, hey, why don't you go apply to so-and-so? And I had a great agent that said, literally, even though they didn't talk to each other, they recommended the same company. The second company I applied for, I was approved. The lesson I took from that is that perseverance. If you really want to own a home, you have to persevere, because things will happen. Life will happen. I lost, not my job, but I lost income. Life will happen. It's just going to happen. But if you want to make home ownership your dream, come true, you have to figure out the way to do it. You have to take the first step of saying, okay, what is my credit score? What is my true credit score in terms of the tri-merge that I was asked about? And I'll get that information to Denise tonight. And then you have to get with the right people. And I would recommend, Denise, Westlake's Financial Wellbeing Center. At least she can walk you through some steps. Because, I had 50 some items that were just crazy. And they weren't major items. They were just stuff we just needed to clean up my report. And he was able to do it for me. There was I had no bad credit items, but it reflected on me in a negative way, and it impacted my score. And then, not knowing what my credit score was, when I first moved here, I had to apply for apartments to live in. Well, I don't know how I got the apartment in the building you saw, given those scores. I don't. I wouldn't have run it to me. Maybe they saw that I was paying everything else on time, but the scores were very low, and that impacts you as well. So, that's a lesson. This guy is a wonderful guy. I used him. He is expensive. I'll be the first to tell you that. I think he's expensive. He may not be, but he got me where I needed to be. He positioned me where I needed to be positioned, and I didn't have to worry about it. And quite frankly, every month I got one of these reports. Man, I was excited. I was bummed out the first 2 months. What you don't see on that first report is my scores actually dipped. And I'm like, why am I paying him for my scores to go down? But you see the end result, persevering, knowing what your goal is, taking the steps to accomplish it, recognizing that along the way, life will happen. You're going to lose income. You may lose a job. You may lose the number of hours you previously were. I've heard it all the last year. And it's unfortunate that we all had to experience COVID or the effects of COVID, even if we did not get the illness. We saw some of our friends' income reduce. I've seen people being evicted in my own neighborhood here. It's just, you just have to be able to bounce back. There was a question on eviction that I wanted to come back to. That's a difficult issue. As a loan officer, our rule of thumb was as long as it wasn't in the last 7 years. What we used to tell people, because again, life happens, if it's within 7 years, because remember, it's a court record now. Court records last for 10 years on your credit report. But if it's 7 years out and you've established a good rental history wherever, then it typically does not matter. But again, that's the judgment and the policies of a particular lender that you're going to, or mortgage broker that you're going to. With my cousin's company, it did not matter as long as it was 7 years out, because what they need to see now is that you've established a record of paying your rent, because that indicates to them that you'll be able to pay your mortgage. Did that answer the question for someone who asked me that? Denise, someone asked me, what is the name and the number of the guy who helped you fix your credit? His name is Tim Saunders. I have his number. Let me see if I can put it in the chat. If you call him, tell him I referred you. I don't know if you'll get any discount. I doubt it, but I know didn't he do one of your seminars, Denise?
Yes, he did. He's very knowledgeable. Really, really wonderful guy.
And let me tell you what he did for me. As you can see what he did in terms of, and actually my scores have gone up even since then. And his name is Tim. I think it's Timothy, but I put it in the chat. 407-734-3426. Here's what he's going to ask you to do. He's going to ask whatever rate his services are now. I know they have gone up because I've referred other people to him and they have gotten back to me and said his price has gone up. I just don't know what it has gone up to. And then he's going to ask you, it's like $10 or $15. So in addition to what he charges, there's an extra $10 or $15 for what's called a credit monitoring service. And what that does is give him access to your credit report. That's the only way he can get access to your report, because, you know, technically he's not supposed to have access. So anytime he filed a dispute letter, I never saw the letter. I don't know what he said. I mean, I have a suspicion of how he approached them, but the letters always came back to him, and they did so because he had the credit monitoring service. While it was in my name, it allowed those letters to be returned to him. And I always tracked, because again, this is someone who has my personal information. I would every now and then pull my own credit report, or I would dispute something just to get because they have to respond in 30 days, and they respond with your complete report, and it would always match up to what he reported out to me. So he does an excellent job. You know, you see these, "We'll help you repair your credit report" signs all over the road. I always say stay leery of it. And if I had not been referred to him by Antoinette, I probably would have stayed leery this time. But he did an excellent job with me, and I hope if you call him, he does an excellent job with you. So that was my journey. Again, I was approved with the second lender. We're not a lender with our program. So if you come to us, you typically have to come, or it would be helpful. It's not a necessity. You can come just to fill out the application. You have to come with a pre-approval letter for whatever the price of the rehab home or the new constructed home is. Now I can tell you, most people, and it shocks me, because remember, I was a loan officer in Kentucky and Tennessee, are getting pre-approved. And again, these are individuals who fall within that income guideline that I shared with you, are getting pre-approved for a significant amount of money. But only you can be the judge of whether or not you can afford to pay it. Because I've seen people at the 80% range get pre-approved for $300,000, and I tell them you can't afford it. If you go buy that house, it will be in foreclosure, or a house that much, it will be in foreclosure in no time. But they got pre-approved. I don't know who pre-approved them. Well, I do know, but I don't know why they did. Let me put it that way. I think that's the end of my presentation. So, or is there another slide, Denise? Oh, 10 tips for applying for a mortgage. Start with your credit report. See me for a Westlake's application. That way I know you're on the radar. And if anything changes, or if the schedule of when a house is available or not available changes, I can get that information to you. Get things in order. You'd be amazed. And I wish some loan officers and realtors were on the phone. You would be amazed at how people are not ready. If you want to know, if you come in, give me an application, say, "Tim, I'm not yet ready. I need to do some stuff, but tell me what I need if I get a pre-approval letter to be approved by the city," because they have to sign off too. It's just not me when it's grant funded. I will get you that letter. It's essentially the same thing you have to do if you apply for down payment assistance. And it's some of the items I mentioned before. Do your homework. Know who you want to apply for a loan to. Sometimes you can go on the internet, and here's what I did. Was this after or before I got turned down? So it had to be after I got turned down. I went on the internet and said, "Give me the 10 best mortgage lenders in the country." I Googled it. And I just did some research on each company, and I ended up picking Loan Depot. And then someone referred them to me as well. So he walked me through it, and I was approved, I want to say in a day or two. And then from rest, after that, I just needed to get in what's called stipulations, meaning stipulations are those list of items that once they have them, they'll sign off on the loan. I tell people all the time, your approval letter, meaning they just looked at your credit report, they looked at your debt ratio, and they think you're going to qualify based on those two reviews. But if you don't get into your stipulations, if you purchase something that you shouldn't have purchased, after the pre-approval letter, you may get disqualified. So just, do your homework. Be realistic about what you can afford. Just because you get a pre-approval letter for $250, if you don't think you can cover that, don't buy a house that's $250. You may, because you still got a pre-approval letter for $250, you may want to stay in the $200 range. All right, it makes a difference. Or $200,000, pardon me. Understand how lenders operate. I kind of shared a sneak peek of what we look at. Tri-merge are important rather than the standard credit scores that you get if you go to Credit Karma, if you go to the credit bureaus like annualcreditreport.com, which I go to. I go to it and look at mine every year because it's free. That's not the score that a lender looks at. You need to look at those FICO scores that I gave you. Decide how you will finance it. Just understand there are closing costs and other costs to closing out the loan. So you got to know what that is. The larger your down payment, the wider your options. So I had a down payment I brought to the table. Now, I didn't have that money. A brother was able to loan it to me, or gift it to me. I'm sorry, not loan it to me, gift it to me. And so I really didn't pay anything. Now, you may not have a relative who's able to do it, or you might. There are some options available if you're able to put down a larger down payment. Take a target rather than a shotgun approach to mortgage application. What that simply means is if you're going to look at more than one lender, you need to figure out which lenders you're going to look at and do that within that period of a week. I think it's a week or two to do your application. That way, those credit pulls only count one pull. Even though it may be three lenders, it only counts as one pull. Not now doesn't mean never. When I was living in that Airbnb, I felt not now was never was occurring. But I was able to save up enough money to pay closing costs and other fees, and was able to get the house. So that's the home ownership process. It seems complicated, and you just have to understand the various players, as I mentioned before, figure out who you're going to do business with based on their rates, interest rates, which are at a historic low, and then find the right realtor. If you get your credit scores and they aren't where you want them to be, get with Denise, get with a housing counselor. She can refer you to some if she can help, and then go from there. That's what I would recommend to you. Denise, I'll take any questions if there are any. I think that was the end of my presentation.
Yes, you have a couple of questions in the chat.
In the chat?
Yes, do you see that?
$10 to $15 is cheap for credit. Yes, it is. So that's what he charged me. His price may be higher now, maybe $20 to $25 or $30 for that much. But it allows him to access your report each month to see if things have changed on it. And then the reports I did a little snippet of is what he actually reports to you. He mails those out to you. No, he emails those out to you. And I loved it for a year and a half getting those reports because I wanted to see if my score went up or down. What percentage of closing costs? Ms. Henderson, it is, I think the range, now this is when I do need a real estate agent, but I want to say the range is 6 to 8%, but I might be wrong on that. Can someone, if you're on the call who may know that, write that in? Ms. Hunter, you said the cost of your credit monitoring, what's the name of the company? She said the cost of hers is $29. Some are high. I would recommend if you, and this is again my take, if you're doing credit monitoring by yourself, unless someone's doing it to help you with your credit score, unless you know how to do it, I wouldn't. You save your $29, find someone who can help you, and just go with them for 6 months. I mean, you didn't, to be honest with you, that year and a half I was with Tim, I probably stayed with him 6 to 7 months longer than I should have. He had really done everything he needed to do, I would say, within a year. You know, it was just, it would go up 5 points here or there, you know, after the year was up. So that's how, you know, we take you from transitioning you from an apartment to a home. There are a number of steps along the way, but perseverance is the key. And as long as you persevere, do the right things, get with the right people. Again, I'd start with Trish. Her organization is a valuable resource. I'll get her the information on the tri-merge stuff that she can send out to you so you know where to get it. Actually, you can Google it if you want to, but I'll get that to her.
So one of the questions, Tim, is from Crystal, and she says, if you doing an income-driven student loan repayment plan, that's zero a month, will that $0 be reflected on your credit score, or what should you be paying?
So you're talking about where your payments were not, when I use the word suspended, but you don't have to pay anything. Is that correct? If that is correct, I was on something similar to that about 3-4 years ago when my income was reduced, and it was great not having to pay it. But again, it's not reporting to the credit bureau that you made a payment. It just is not reporting against you. So that's okay, but it's not increasing your scores because you haven't made a payment. It's just there. And the balance of your student loan is going up because there's an interest attached to it. You know, the one thing they don't suspend, actually, my student loan, I've paid down more in the last year and a half, whenever they started no payments. I've paid down my student loan more in the last year or so than I have in the entire lifetime of the loan. So because of interest, there's no interest that's accumulating. And that's what hurts most people, is the interest that's attached to the loan. If they got rid, I mean, I'd love for them to do it, but I don't need them to get rid of my debt because I took it out. What I need them to do is stop charging me interest and let me pay what I actually took out from the beginning.
And then you have a question from Stephanie, and she says, do you have a guideline to write in verification letters and verify letters to the credit bureau? Also, who do we send the letters to?
Well, so here's, again, I'm just giving you my inside knowledge as a former loan officer. So let's say, um, you get your credit report and something's wrong on the credit bureau. And that happens a lot. The least paid people at credit bureaus are those who are inputting your information on your credit report. So there's mistakes made all the time. Not that they're bad people, it's just there are mistakes made. As you noted on mine, we cleaned up 54 of them. Some of them weren't even mistakes. They were just duplicates, et cetera, et cetera. What you would do is you dispute it directly with the credit bureau. They have 30 days to respond. Now, credit bureaus wouldn't be in business if they deleted everything you disputed. So they like to extend it out by saying, oh, the information's good, we verified it, blah, blah, blah. And then you send them another letter because you want to keep disputing it, you want verification, et cetera, et cetera. And then usually, the first time I ever did it, I got a lot of stuff taken off my report. This is about 20 years ago. Now, here's the exception. Let's say you, and this is when I tell people, why are you paying on a debt that no longer hurts you? So here's a good example. When I was a loan officer, this lady came in, she got approved, but she had a lot of medical debt. She thought that would hurt her. And she said, well, let me pay that off first. I said, unless a lender requires that you pay that off, leave that debt alone, because it has already hurt you. It won't hurt you anymore. Every time you make a payment on that debt, the clock, that 7-year clock starts again. Does everyone understand what I mean there? Debt can only stay on your credit report for 7 years unless it's an eviction or a court record that stays on for 10. But debt can only stay on for 7 years. Every time you make a partial payment, that clock starts all over again. So that 7-year clock, that's why if something ever gets back on my credit report that's negative, unless I'm told to repay it, I'm not paying it. Now, I pay it because I owe it, but I pay it off in full, not in partial payments, because I only want it to affect my credit report that one payment and not over a series of payments. Did that answer your question? Oh, if you go to the next slide, Denise, I think that's my contact information. Yep, there you go. You can either go to our website, which you go under housing and you can download the application. I think it's fillable application. You can email it back to me. That way I know you're interested. Like right now I have 6 people who are interested in 622 South Lakeland. Now, will all 6 of those get through the process? No. They may not want to move into the neighborhood. They may find something else. But right now I have 6 people who are interested. That's my phone number. Just to let you know, that number is essentially a voicemail message service. So if you leave a message, it does ring into my cell phone. So sometimes I can catch it, sometimes I can't. But if you leave a message, I will return it within 24 to 48 hours. If you do the application online, you can save it, download it and save it, and then email it back to me at tayers@westlakespartnership.org. If you have just general questions, you can email me and I'll be more than happy to answer them. Denise, we have anything else?
I received actually an email about a question. So someone was concerned about that they don't live in West Lakes, and can they still be a part of this application process? And I think you said that initially the 2 of the houses, the the individuals who purchased the house were not Westlake's residents. Is that correct?
Correct. The purchasers of the first two houses we did were not Westlake's residents. Actually, none of the applicants for either of those houses, let me get that, let me think about that. Yeah, none of the applicants for either of those houses have been Westlake's residents. All of them have lived outside of the community. And you know, I cannot, because it's HUD money, I cannot say I'm going to favor Westlake's residents over non-Westlake's resident. I have to go with whoever gets me a pre-approval letter first and says, that's the house I want. It's as simple as that. Remember, if it's government funded, I have little wiggle room. I have very little wiggle room. If it's privately funded, like 622 is, and again, we're the seller, I have a great deal of wiggle room. I have like, for example, the first house we did, I had two applicants who made it to the finalists, so to speak. They both were pre-approved. They both had their pre-approval letter. They filled out the application. There was just the person who ended up with it had down payment, or no, had closing costs, which the other person didn't have. And they required closing cost assistance. And I believe at the time, the city was slowing down on providing down payment assistance. So that's why I say to you, you know, that those are the things you got to take care of beforehand. By the way, congratulations, Ms. Hunter, for having your score improved. I'm glad to know someone's working with you on that. Because sometimes you just have to do it. You just have to bite the bullet. Don't try to do it on your own. Just don't. I mean, find someone who's reliable. Because I'm telling you, credit bureaus, and they're good people, but they want to stretch it out so that you get tired and stop. And quite frankly, that's why I said, you know what, I need help. I don't have the time. I no longer have the patience. Let me get someone, reach out to someone who happened to know someone who could help. And that's what happened. And here I am. So the backdrop that you see is my living room to my new home. So, I mean, you'll get there. You'll get there. You'll get there. You'll get there. It may take some time. My journey was 3 years. You know, even though I've been here 7, the bulk of that was living in an apartment. It took me 3 years. Some of you, it may only take 3 months. Some of you may take longer than 3 years. But if you keep that as your goal, you'll get there. You'll make that transition from an apartment to a homeowner. And then, you know, sometimes it's in your best interest if you remain a property owner. And I say that not a property owner, apartment dweller. I say that only because here's the downside with being a homeowner. Yes, I have equity. Yes, I have all the great stuff. Yes, I have the independence of living in my own home. But my house is 11 years old. Last week, I have 2 bathrooms. Both of the commodes in each bathrooms decided to stop working. If I lived in an apartment, I could just call maintenance and they would have fixed it already. I'm trying to get a plumber and they're hard to get to fix the 2 commodes. So, you know, there's a downside to being a homeowner as well, but I think the upside is far better than the downside, but you do have to weigh that.